Today's session marks an important turning point in your development as storytellers. Up to this point, many of you have learned how to describe places. You know how to explain where a scene happens. But description alone does not build a story world. It only outlines its surface. In this session, you will learn something far more powerful. You will learn how setting becomes experience, how atmosphere shapes emotion, and how the world of your story can think, react, and even speak before a single line of dialogue is spoken. We will begin by breaking the habit of neutral description and replace it with immersive perception. You will learn how scent, sound, light, texture, and taste work together to pull the reader inside a scene, so deeply that they forget they are reading words on a page. Then we go further. You will discover that setting is never neutral. Every environment is filtered through the psychology of the character experiencing it. A room does not feel oppressive by accident. It feels oppressive because of who is inside it and what they are carrying emotionally. In this session, you will learn how to choose details based on psychological importance, not decoration. How to use setting as pressure, not background. How environments can communicate subtext and theme without explanation. How atmosphere evolves over time instead of remaining static. And how contrast and deception in setting can quietly intensify tension. By the end of this class, you should no longer be asking, "How do I describe this place?" Instead, you should be asking, "How does this place influence what happens next?" That question is the doorway from competent writing to professional storytelling. Hello everyone, and welcome back. I am absolutely thrilled to see all your bright faces today. This is the session where we truly start breathing soul into your settings, moving beyond simple descriptions to create worlds that are palpable, memorable, and most importantly, experienced by your readers. Today we're diving deep into Session 6, Setting an Atmosphere, Building the Narrative World. Think about the difference between a photograph and a memory. A photograph is a static image. A memory, however, is a sensory event. The smell of rain on hot asphalt, the muffled sound of music from a distant room, the scratchy texture of an old wool blanket. As storytellers, we are not just painting pictures. We are engineering memories. We are building a world that resonates with the reader's own senses, making them forget they are reading words on a page. This is the power of atmosphere and setting, the fundamental shift from description to immersion. Many aspiring writers make a crucial mistake. They describe the setting. They write, "The room was dark and cold." That's telling. Our goal is to immerse the reader in the setting. We want them to feel the darkness and the cold. That is showing. Immersion is achieved through the 5 sensory channels. We must activate all of them, not just sight. At the power of scent, olfactory details. Of all the senses, smell is the most directly linked to memory and emotion. Simple scent can instantly transport a character or a reader back 20 years. Go beyond the obvious. Don't just mention bad smell or sweet smell. Be specific. Is it the stale cigarette smoke clinging to the velvet curtains? The metallic tang of rain on the wind? The dusty, forgotten aroma of dried lavender in a grandmother's attic? Scent is character. Scents can tell us about the people who inhabit a space. A cheap, overwhelming pine air freshener in a car suggests something different about the driver than the faint scent of expensive leather and pipe. Tobacco in an old study. Scent as warning. A sudden, acrid smell of burnt plastic or ozone can signal immediate danger, raising the stakes without a single action being taken. 2. The symphony of sound, auditory details. A silent setting is a dead setting. Even silence has a sound, a heavy, pressurized quality that pushes against the eardrums. Layering sounds. Real environments are a mix of background noise, the ambience, and specific events. A city street isn't just loud. It's the distant, mournful horn of a ship, the staccato rhythm of high heels on the pavement, and the constant, low thrum of traffic that sounds like a tired, sleeping giant. Muffling and distortion. How do walls, fog, or distance affect sound? A conversation heard through a closed door is muffled. Indistinct, like speaking underwater. This adds mystery and tension. The psychological impact. A steady, repetitive sound, like a dripping faucet or the ticking of a grandfather clock, can become a torture, mirroring a character's internal anxiety. 3. The canvas of light. Visual details. Focus on illumination. While visual description is the most common, we must focus on how things are seen. Light is not just brightness. It's color, quality, shadow, and mood. The quality of light. Is the light harsh and clinical? Like a bare fluorescent bulb in a hospital waiting room? Is it warm and golden, filtering through the dust motes in a late afternoon sunbeam? Or is it sickly and green, reflecting off a neon sign outside a diner window? Shadow and mood. Shadows create mystery and tension. They can conceal danger or distort reality. A simple lamp can cast monstrous, dancing shadows on the walls, making an ordinary room feel threatening. Contrast and focus. Use light to direct the reader's eye. A single focused beam of light in a dark space. A flashlight beam. A spotlight immediately draws attention to the object it illuminates, making it critical to the scene. 4. The texture of the world. Tactile details. How does the world feel? This is critical for grounding the reader in the physical reality of the scene. Temperature and air. It's not just cold. It's a biting, aggressive cold that stings the exposed skin. It's a humid air so thick it feels like breathing soup. Surface textures. Is the floor gritty with fine sand? Is the countertop slick with old grease? Is the fabric of the sofa worn thin, with threads that catch and pull? These details provide immediate, unconscious information about the age, cleanliness, and decay of the environment. Internal tactile sensations. Don't forget the character's internal feelings. The furious thumping of their own heart against their ribs, the clammy sweat on their palms. 5. The taste of place. Gustatory details. While less frequently used, taste can be profoundly atmospheric, often working in conjunction with smell. The air itself. A coastal town might have the briny, sharp taste of sea salt on the lips. A factory town might leave a faint, metallic bitterness at the back of the throat. A simple sip. A single sip of cold, flat coffee in an early morning. Scene can convey a character's exhaustion and the dreary start to their day better than a paragraph of internal monologue. Atmosphere. Setting as an emotional state. Atmosphere is the emotional coloring of your setting. It's what happens when you combine the sensory details to create a dominant mood. Dread, tranquility, excitement, or isolation. Concordance. The setting should harmonize with the narrative mood. If the scene is one of foreboding and suspense, you might use sound. The silence is broken only by a distant, irregular creak. Light. The moon is obscured, leaving only low, shifting shadows. Scent. The air is damp and heavy, carrying the smell of wet earth and decay. Dissonance. The unsettling contrast. Sometimes, the atmosphere should clash with the events. Imagine a horrific, violent act taking place on a day of bright, cheerful sunshine and the happy sound of children playing nearby. This dissonance is profoundly unsettling and heightens the tragedy. The role of detail. Selection, not saturation. You cannot describe everything. You must become a masterful editor of reality, the single telling detail. Instead of listing 10 things in a room, choose the one detail that summarizes the whole. If you are in a rundown tenement, don't just say the wall was cracked. Say, a spider web of cracks radiated from a single, dark hole in the plaster, like a slow-motion scream. That single image is worth pages of general description. Linking setting to theme. Your setting should never be neutral. Is your story about loss? Perhaps the buildings in your town are decaying. The wallpaper is peeling, and the river is sluggish and muddy. The world itself mirrors the theme. Your practical assignment for next week. I want you to take a common, everyday location, a coffee shop, a bus stop, your own kitchen, and write a 500-word piece where nothing happens. The character is simply observing. The rule: you must use at least 3 details for scent, 3 for sound, and 3 for tactile sensation. You must make the reader feel the texture of the air, the feel of the seat, and the sounds layered around them. Don't describe the appearance of the person next to you. Describe the metallic, faint scent of the cheap cologne they wear and the quiet, rhythmic tapping of their thumbnail against their phone screen. This practice is the bedrock of building a believable narrative world. Remember this: your setting is not merely a backdrop. It is a character, a container for the action, and a constant mirror reflecting the emotional truth of your story. Use your senses, choose your details wisely, and build worlds that your readers can not only see, but breathe in. Session 6, Part 2. Setting and Atmosphere. When the world begins to speak. Dear students, in the first part of this session, we explored how setting moves beyond description and becomes experience. We learned how the senses shape immersion, how atmosphere is born from detail, and why a space must be felt, not merely seen. Today we move deeper. Today we examine what happens when setting stops being passive and begins to observe, judge, apply pressure, and sometimes even deceive. If Part 1 taught you how to build a world, Part 2 will teach you how to activate it. 1. There is no neutral setting. One of the most dangerous illusions in writing is the belief in objectivity. There is no neutral room, no neutral street, no neutral house. Every setting in a story is filtered through perception. Even the act of noticing one detail instead of another is a psychological choice, not a factual one. A crowded cafe does not mean the same thing to everyone. To a lonely character, it may feel alienating, loud, cruelly alive. To a grieving character, the laughter may sound disrespectful, even obscene. To a hopeful character, it may feel warm, promising, full of potential connection. The space does not change. The observer does. This means something crucial for you as a writer. You are never describing a place. You are describing a relationship between a character and a place. If your setting feels flat, ask yourself, whose emotional lens am I using, and why? 2. Detail is psychological selection. Writers often believe strong atmosphere comes from adding more detail. This is incorrect. Atmosphere is not built by saturation. It is built by selection. Your character does not register everything. The human mind never does. It latches onto what matters emotionally or unconsciously. Imagine a character entering an unfamiliar apartment. A frightened character notices the lock clicking too quietly, the narrowness of the hallway, the smell of something stale, old, unwashed. A confident character notices the height of the ceiling, the placement of furniture, the view from the window. Same space, different story. Effective setting asks not, what is there? But what does the character's inner state allow them to notice? This is how setting becomes narrative psychology. 3. Setting as pressure, not decoration. A professional writer understands that setting should do work. A room should not merely exist, it should apply pressure. Pressure can take many forms. Physical, low ceilings, extreme heat, confined spaces. Sensory, constant noise, oppressive silence, intrusive smells. Symbolic, decay, rigidity, artificial perfection. Consider a scene of confrontation. You can stage it anywhere, but where you place it changes everything. A confrontation in an open field feels different from one in a cramped elevator. A confession whispered in a hospital corridor carries a different weight than the same words shouted in a nightclub. Ask yourself, how does this space make escape harder? How does it intensify emotional exposure? When setting increases pressure, dialogue becomes sharper, actions more desperate, silence is heavier. That is not coincidence. That is engineering. 4. Environment as subtext. One of the most advanced uses of setting is subtextual storytelling, when the environment communicates something the characters cannot or will not say. A perfectly clean home with no personal objects can suggest emotional emptiness. A cluttered workspace filled with half-finished projects can suggest obsession or creative instability. A child's room left untouched for years can silently express unresolved grief. The power here is restraint. You do not explain the emotion. You let the setting imply it. Readers are far more moved by what they discover than what they are told. If you ever feel the urge to explain a character's emotional state directly, pause and ask, "Can the room say this for me?" Often it can, and better. 5. Atmosphere is a pattern, not a moment. Another common mistake is treating atmosphere as something you establish once at the beginning of a scene. Atmosphere is not an opening paragraph. It is a continuous signal. If a space is threatening, that threat should echo in the way sounds repeat, in how light behaves, in how the character's body responds over time. If an environment is safe, it should cushion the character. Soft textures, slower rhythms, predictable sounds. Atmosphere is consistency with meaning. A single eerie detail does not create dread. A pattern of unease does. This is why repetition, used carefully, is powerful. The dripping faucet, the flickering light, the always locked door, not because they are dramatic, but because they outlast attention. 6. When setting lies. Advanced storytelling sometimes requires a dangerous trick, deceptive atmosphere. A place appears safe but is not, or appears peaceful, while something terrible approaches. This contrast creates unease because human instincts rely on environmental cues. When those cues fail, tension skyrockets. A cheerful, brightly lit space hosting a violent act feels more disturbing than a dark alley. Why? Because expectations are violated. This is not random. It is deliberate manipulation, and when used carefully, extremely effective. But restraint matters. If you overuse contrast, readers learn not to trust anything. The power lies in surprise, not habit. 7. Common advanced mistakes to avoid. At this level, the mistakes are subtle but damaging. Over-describing static space instead of showing how it interacts with behavior. Using atmospheric cliches, eerie silence, dark shadows, without specificity. Forgetting the body. Characters should physically react to space, letting setting repeat itself without escalation. A scene should not feel the same at the end as it did at the beginning, even if nothing happens. Pressure accumulates, perception shifts, atmosphere thickens. Final exercise for mastery. For this week, build on your previous assignment. Take the same everyday location you used before. Now, introduce a change in the character's emotional state. Describe the same setting again, but allow different details to surface. Use fewer words than before, but make them sharper. The goal is not expansion. The goal is precision. Final thought. A weak story treats setting as background. A competent story treats it as context. A powerful story treats setting as a living system, one that reacts, pressures, reflects, and sometimes resists. When you master this, you stop writing scenes that happen somewhere. You begin writing scenes that could only happen there. That is the difference between telling a story and building a world that thinks, breathes, and remembers. This concludes part 2 of session 6. As we conclude today's session, it is important to step back and recognize what you have actually learned. You did not simply learn how to add more sensory detail. You learned that setting is a system, a living system that filters perception through character psychology, applies emotional and physical pressure, reflects theme without explanation, and changes meaning as the character changes. You learned that atmosphere is not created by a single striking image, but by patterns, repeated sounds, persistent textures, consistent light, and lingering sensations that quietly work on the reader over time. You learned that the most powerful settings are not the most detailed ones, but the most selective, the ones that choose the right detail at the right moment and trust the reader to feel the rest. Most importantly, you learned that a strong scene does not merely take place somewhere. A strong scene could only exist in that specific space, at that specific moment, experienced by that specific character. That is the standard you are now working toward. Your assignment is not busy work. It is training your perception. It is teaching you to see the world the way a storyteller must. Not as background noise, but as narrative force. Remember this principle moving forward. When setting is weak, scenes feel replaceable. When setting is alive, scenes become inevitable. This is not decoration. This is structure. And from this point on, every world you build must earn its place in the story. That concludes Session 6.